10 Luckiest Purchases on Storage Wars. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the SCREENY. Buyers on the Storage Wars got into this business in hope that they'll stumble upon a precious locker filled with hidden treasures that are worth a fortune. Most of them never made more than a couple of thousand on a single unit, but some storage warriors were lucky enough to strike gold and walk away with more money than they can count. Let's take a look at the 10 luckiest purchases on Storage Wars. Before we remind you of the best finds in the history of this show, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Number 10. High Art. Storage warriors tend to drive a hard bargain every time they come across a unit filled with artwork, and that's exactly what happened during the episode Portrait of the Gambler. You could tell how much Brandy Passante wanted it for herself, and she even went against Jared's wishes by continuing to bid after he told her not to. He eventually forced her to give up, and Daryl Sheets got his hand on the locker that turned out to be worth a fortune. The gambler and his son Brandon couldn't hide their excitement as they started going through the locker. The duo was impressed by all the little trinkets they found inside it, but the paintings by Frank Gutierrez were the icing on the cake. After finding boxes of his artwork, Daryl only had to make sure everything was legit. He got in touch with an expert who confirmed Frank Gutierrez was the mastermind behind all the drawings, paintings, and decorated objects in his possession. The total value of all the artwork was appraised to be worth $300,000, making this the most valuable find in Storage Wars history. Number 9. Good news. Coming across a storage unit filled with old newspapers wouldn't impress most people. And then there's Dave Hester. After years in the biz, the mogul learned it's sometimes impossible to guess if the locker is going to be a boom or bust, and you simply have to go with your guts. That's what he did during the episode Senior Center Showdown and invested $750 on a unit that didn't seem so impressive to the rest of the buyers. It turned out his hunch was right, and Hester ended up making one of the biggest profits of his career. The locker was filled with old newspapers that all had one thing in common. They were published on August 16th, 1977, the day when Elvis left the building. His passing made the front page on every major publication in the US, and the papers found in this unit served as a unique time capsule reminding the world of that tragic day. Hester valued them at $90,000 since collectors of Elvis memorabilia never shied away from spending huge sums of cash to acquire items connected to the king of rock and roll. Number 8. Pirate Treasure. The luckiest storage unit Dan and Laura ever auctioned never made it on camera, and it was purchased by a private buyer who became $500,000 richer in the process. Despite the fact this lucky find wasn't a part of Storage Wars, this mystery buyer used the American Auctioneer Service, the same one used on the show. The lucky bidder cashed out $1,000 to become the new owner of this locker, and everyone who went against him probably regretted not offering more money for this unit. When the buyer went through its content, they stumbled upon an extremely heavy box. It took a team of 3 people to move it out of the unit, but once they lifted the lid, the 3 couldn't believe their luck. The box was filled with Spanish gold, known by the name Pieces of 8, some of it even dating back to the 16th century. After having it appraised, the buyer discovered they could get $500,000 for these precious coins. Number 7. Faceless Cash. Dan Dotson and Laura auction off some of the most profitable lockers while the cameras weren't rolling, and a few of them contained pretty unexpected items. One of those units just so happened to come with $24,000 in cash, but there was something pretty special about each bill in this collection. The previous owner had bizarrely removed the faces from every single bill before abandoning their locker. One lucky bidder spent $400 on a storage unit containing these bills and didn't expect to find anything special. At the first glance, it seems like nothing but junk was stored inside this locker, but everything changed when the new owner started digging deeper and stumbled upon a fortune. Things got a little bit strange since someone drilled the faces out of every single bill, and the buyer started wondering if they'll even be able to cash them in. Fortunately, it turned out the bank will accept them after a series of tests, as long as both serial numbers are still intact. Number 6. Nerd's Wet Dream. When you spend $15,750 on a single locker, you kind of expect to find a treasure inside it. And that's exactly what happens on the episode of Zen Masters of the Universe. The crew took a trip to Fontana, where Daryl Sheets spotted a unit that he described as the locker of the decade, and decided to go all in. The gambler engaged in a pretty heated bidding war and spent more cash than he ever did to get his hand on this locker. Sheets got his money's worth since the unit contained dozens of collectible dolls and action figures in their original boxes. Daryl knew he won't have to struggle to find a buyer since they were all in pristine condition. The locker turned out to be a comic book fan's wet dream, since it also contained boxes filled with classic comics, around 3,000 of them to be exact. After appraising all the items inside this unit, Sheets came to the conclusion he'll make around $75,000 in net profit after selling them. Number 5. Good Fight. Some of the biggest buys in Storage Wars history were fueled by conflicts between buyers, including the one that took place during the episode Mr. Neshoda's Opus. After a fight they had before the auction, Dave Hester and Reen Neshoda ended up going head-to-head, bidding for the same locker. Neshoda won and ended up cashing out $3,900 in the process, but he hadn't regretted it for a second. It proved to be a good bargain, since it took 2 trucks to take all the items back to his thrift store. His wife Casey couldn't hide her excitement after looking through all the items with Reen, since they stumbled upon dozens of stunning vintage trinkets. After going through all of it, the couple came to the conclusion this locker must be worth $50,000. Number 4. Wild Wild West.
Looks like they're signed in pencil.
If we've got 50 prints with signatures, we could be talking a mother...
When Daryl Sheets splashed out $210 on a storage unit in Santa Ana, he pretty much just did it for fun. None of the other buyers were putting up a fight, and the gambler decided spending a bit of cash won't hurt, even if the locker turns out to be a bust. Fortunately, things sometimes have a way of working out, and that's exactly what happens on this episode of Storage Wars. Once Daryl and Brandon went through the locker, they were pretty impressed, and found enough stuff to break even in a matter of seconds. To be fair, the locker was cheap to begin with, but things just got better as they kept going. The duo stumbled upon a butt ton of art once again. After getting in touch with an expert, the Sheets found out that the 50 Western prints in their possession could be sold for $20,000. Number 3. Playing dirty. Being a good storage warrior isn't only about having great instincts. It's also about working the room and pitting other buyers against each other so you can get what you want. That was the reason why Dave Hester walked away with $27,650 after the episode Buyers on the Storm wrapped up. He set his eyes on this locker, convinced everyone else it was worthless, and sank his teeth into it when the time was right. Once the rest of the buyers lost interest, Hester jumped in, bidded $1,350 and got the locker for himself. The unit was filled with an old vending machine, but the mogul spotted big boxes in the back that no one else did. Dave predicted that they will be filled with brand new machines, and it turned out he was right. After having his team do some research, Hester found out that they'll be able to cash in almost $30,000 after selling them. Number 2. Toying with cash. Daryl Sheets' enormous success proves you sometimes have to go with your gut to make a good buck, and that's exactly what he did during an auction in Montebello in 2014. He had his eyes set on a locker everyone else wanted for themselves, and threw his hat in the ring once other buyers started pulling out. The gambler invested $2,800 into this locker, and it proved to be a good price to pay. Sheets had a good feeling about this unit because he scored every time he went to Montebello, but this turned out to be one of the luckiest lockers to date. Once he started going through its content with his son, the duo found more collectible toys than they could count. Most of them were still in their original boxes, and Brandon was so excited that he could sing after opening each and every one. The father-son duo got in touch with an expert who informs them that the Star Wars and Marvel vintage toys they stumbled upon were even more valuable right now than back in the day. eBay. It turned out that they could earn around $40,000 after finding a buyer. Number 1. Stolen comic book. One of the items with a very loose connection to Storage Wars was once appraised at $1 million after being found inside an abandoned storage unit in Southern California. It was a copy of the Superman comic called Action Comics number 1. The craziest part? This copy once belonged to the legendary actor Nicolas Cage. It was reported stolen from his Los Angeles home, but the star ended up receiving insurance money for its loss. Stephen Fischler, who sold the comic book to Cage back in 1995, described it as the most important and valuable comic book in history, since superheroes weren't really a thing before it came out. Despite the fact there's around 100 copies in existence, only 6 of them stayed in a good preserved condition, including the one that was stolen from Cage. The mystery buyer who found it used the American Auctioneer Service, ran by Dan and Laura Dotson, and got in touch with the Storage Wars star Mark Bellello to help him sell the comic. Thank you very much for watching today's video. Make sure to subscribe to our channel for more amazing content, and don't forget to check out one of the other 2 videos on your screen.